let's get into the big topic of open source, something that we actually say at Red Hat.
This is so awesome.
We are an open culture that believes in
What is that process that a developer, or let's say
as the Kubernetes ecosystem really boomed?
Hello and welcome to this week's Ask an OpenShift Expert live stream. I am Andrew Sullivan, sadly not joined by my co-host, Mr. Jonny Rickard today. Jonny is on some well-deserved paid time off and enjoying what I hope is a very relaxing week away from work and not worrying about any of the things that we have going on. Instead, he's focused on family and all the other fun stuff. So we miss him. I hope he is well and enjoying himself, but I'm looking forward to him being back next week. That being said, I have two of my favorite people joining us today, two folks that I have regular interactions with, and I'm super happy to welcome to the live stream. So Yifat, Peter, I will allow you to introduce yourselves to the audience today.
Hey, so I'm Peter Kreuser. I'm the OpenShift UXT team lead. So we take a look, as Sully mentioned, across the entire experience of OpenShift, but Yifat is our lead in the OpenShift virtualization space. So I'll hand it off to you, Yifat, to introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Yifat. I'm leading the user experience for CNV, OpenShift Virtualization, and we'll share some of our highlights for the latest period of time.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this session in particular because for me, it's the culmination of a lot of work on the back end. I say a lot of work. It's mostly me just running my mouth to Peter and Yifat and Ronan and several other folks on the UX team and in the product management team, and voicing opinions and stuff like that. So seeing all of this come to fruition and seeing it actually available inside of live running clusters today and stuff like that it's always exciting to me, and it's always I always enjoy that payoff of seeing things happen. So I also want to point out that the UX of OpenShift is something, and Peter, you've been on the stream a number of times, it's something that's constantly evolving. And I love that we are, from a virtualization perspective, because I don't know if you can see my sweatshirt here, right? I'm a virtual OpenShift virtualization person, like, especially from the virtualization perspective, so much has changed in the last 2.5 years as OpenShift virtualization has really, come to the forefront of virtualization offerings across the industry. We've seen more and more adoption. I don't even know how many tens of thousands of VMs we have now running on OpenShift virtualization, but it's amazing to see all this happening and bringing the UX to a set of folks who maybe don't want to be, CLI YAML driven like a more traditional Kubernetes admin has been. So anyways, this is my long and rambling way of saying, I love you guys. I love it when y'all come on and we get to see all the cool stuff that's happening. I think both Peter and I have some clusters that we'll use to show some things. Yifat has a bunch of slides that demonstrates all different aspects of the networking UI that's changed, because that's been a big point of not contention, but confusion for folks with the traditional way that OpenShift has done networking configuration.
Yeah, you said it there, Sully, but I guess I'd like to expand on it a little bit more. We've had this design team focused on OpenShift for many years, and OpenShift console has always been seen as like a supplement, as you alluded to, like the CLI API interactions. Generally, it exposes the resources of OpenShift and Kubernetes, and that's worked well for our OpenShift admins for years. But as you said, we have this other type of admin that's more virtualization oriented, that is used to the more like ClickOps oriented experience. So it has been nice. Yifat is certainly leading this whole effort, but now we have more interactions right inside of the UI than we ever have for virtualization interactions. And those are the type of things that we'll highlight today. So thanks for saying that.
Yeah. Well, like you said, right, the UI historically has been, it's a graphical representation of the API endpoints. And now we're seeing this maturation to where it's more how we as humans interact with it. And I think I've said that before. I think Peter, you and Kyle were on showing the work that's being done for node management and stuff like that. So yeah, again, I know there's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes. There's a lot of stuff. I have, every time I have a meeting with y'all, I learn more and more stuff about how all of this works. And it's always surprising to me how a seemingly simple thing in the UI is actually a lot of work on the back end, and not just like making all the little things line up. But like, how do we interact with the UIs and extract, or APIs rather, and extract the right information, and how can we present it in a way that makes sense? So yeah.
Totally. And I think what Yifat's going to share today, this networking example, really is like a prime example of getting away from just like exposing APIs and actually building interactions around flows. So it's pretty exciting. I'm glad that Yifat's bringing that today.
Yeah. Top of mind wise, I don't have a lot of stuff to share with anybody, and by not a lot of stuff, I mean I don't really have anything. If you weren't aware, OpenShift 4.21 is GA. It is available. You can go and download it now, and you can deploy that to your new clusters. As always, remember that upgrade paths take in the stable channel take longer to appear. So if you're running OpenShift 4.20 today, if you're using the fast channel, you can upgrade to 4.21 now. That is a fully supported upgrade. So by all means, if there's things in 4.21 you want or need, you can upgrade. And if something goes wrong, pick up the phone and call us. However, getting to the stable channel typically takes 45 to 60 days. Sometimes it can be a little longer. Sometimes it can be a little shorter. So if you're waiting on stable, just keep in mind that you have a little bit longer to wait. Yeah, I think that was the only thing that I really had to share, was just a reminder about that. Jonny will be back next week. I think we've got a number of things that we'll be talking about. I also want to get back to, I had a chat when I was at Red Hat One, I don't know, however long ago that was, 3 or 4 weeks ago, with some of the other folks who do live streaming here with Red Hat. And one of the suggestions was like, hey, y'all haven't done any of the like basics in a long time. Maybe we should go back and revisit some of the basics. So one of the things that I want to go back and start exploring is like OpenShift installs, right? It's something that we covered back in the very early days of the stream here, where we talked about like all the different install methods. I remember, I think it was OpenShift 4.5 when vSphere IPI was first added. And so we were showing like, how to do vSphere IPI and how to do all these things and pulling apart the install process and all that. So going back and looking at sort of install basics, but also looking at the current state of the installer experience. Peter, you've been deeply involved in a lot of those different experiences, and how do we? What's the most efficient? What's the method with the least? I'll say friction isn't the right word, but maybe the most user-friendly way of installing OpenShift, particularly if you're a beginner.
Very topical, I guess I'll say. Like we are very interested in making the install experience as simple as possible, because there are so many people trying to get OpenShift set up for OpenShift virtualization cases, and they haven't been creating OpenShift clusters in the past. Honestly, something top of mind is just like purely the discoverability of these new installers that we have. They are easier to use, but if I'm being upfront with you, they're not the simplest to find your way to them. So that's honestly something that we're focusing on right now as a UX team.
Yeah. Now I'm wondering if you're on the same email chain I am. That's floating around in my inbox, and that's talking about exactly that topic with a lot of very senior folks here inside of Red Hat. So, yeah, to your point, it is definitely something that's top of mind, and it's something that we want to make sure that folks are aware of.
Absolutely.
So with that, so this is Ask an OpenShift Expert. So today's topic is about the UI and networking and virtualization and all of that type of stuff. However, if you have questions about anything OpenShift related, don't hesitate to ask those. Don't hesitate to put that in the chat, and we'll do our best to answer those questions. We don't. There we go. I don't know what just happened. It blipped and said I was reconnecting. So please don't hesitate to ask whatever questions you have, whatever comes to mind. We will do our best to answer those. If it's something that we don't know the answer to off the top of our heads, I play a OpenShift expert on TV here, but that doesn't mean that I am one. But we do have a myriad of super smart folks here in the background that we can reach out to and try and get answers in real time. And if not, we can follow up, and we'll answer those questions in a following stream. And of course, you are always welcome to reach out to us. My email address is here on screen, sully@redhat.com. If you prefer Jonny's lovely face, you can reach out to Jonny as well. He's easy to reach at jonny@redhat.com. And both of us we love to chase down folks and ask questions and stuff like that. It's a learning opportunity for not just us, but for everyone when we go through this stuff. So don't hesitate to ask any questions that come to mind. And with that, Yifat, are you leading off, I think?
I'll share my screen.
Okay.
That's okay.
Yeah, please do.
Okay. I just,
Yep, and we see your slides there, or
yeah,
it's just not in presentation mode yet.
yeah, exactly. Sorry about that. I don't know why it's not in presentation mode.
I don't know if you want, I can share the slides if that's easier.
Can you see it now?
Let's add that. There we go. That looks good.
Yeah, but okay, let's start. Okay, so we're going to talk about some of the UX challenges we have, and then dive into the networking features that we delivered in 4.21, and end up with another feature that we delivered in 4.21, which is the CNV integration with Lightspeed. So, challenges. If we compare OpenShift virtualization to other products or technologies, we see differences in the UX. We have some gaps that are derived from the Kubernetes terminology that we are using. We have some different RBAC models, and so on. We constantly perform usability studies and ongoing user research to get a user's feedback on our designs. And as an example, I will share the networking changes that we implemented in 4.21, where we chose to use the current, to take an approach of preparing one large complex network configuration policy and break it down into smaller, simple configuration to provide our users with more or less the same functionalities. Peter, do you want to go now to the?
Yeah, I could share a cluster if you want to talk through some of the changes that have come from a recent usability study.
Okay, so I will stop sharing and jump to your screen. Yeah. So what we found in our usability study about this search bar at the top of the screen was that some users that had some difficulties to find the advanced search button. And therefore we decided to move it inside. Can you share the other doc, please? Yeah. To nest it inside the search bar. We're going to have a little circle behind it and also make it larger. So when the icon is hovered over, we'll show a light gray background, and the moment later, this tooltip with the advanced search type text will be shown as well. Hopefully that will make our users find it much easier. And we also had another issue with the duplication of the search bar, the one that Peter is pointing at the top, and the one that is just above the table. So yes, this one. So we decided to consolidate and combine them with some help text inside, so users will be able to know which does what. We have another search bar inside the tree, which is dedicated to search clusters and projects. So users will be able to deal now with only two, one for the clusters and projects inside the tree, and the other one for the resource they are looking for, which is mainly VMs. So in general, we are listening to our users. We adopt the findings that we get from the usability studies, and yeah, this is very important to us, and we put lots of efforts into the findings.
Yeah, thanks for highlighting these, Ifat. As Ifat said, we're always trying to get feedback from our users. So I guess I'll say, like, on this stream too, if there's anything we're sharing over the course of this, feel free to jump in and give us feedback on it. I'll also offer my email at the end, just in case you want to get in touch with us. I'll mention too, Sully, you referenced earlier Red Hat 1, which is sort of like the sales kickoff at Red Hat. Our team was there and sort of did a similar thing where we were seeking feedback from sales folks, services folks, basically just trying to understand, because those are the people at Red Hat that interface directly with our customers, you all watching the stream. So we're always interested in getting feedback from you, from them, trying to understand how we can make our products better. So I just wanted to mention that as like another source of way we get feedback.
Yeah, and I'll take a moment to highlight, like, you showed the current, and I think that's 420 cluster that you had up there, the current view of like virtualization, which has, the tree view that has all of the namespaces and all of the different VMs and everything that are available inside of there. So that came directly from user feedback as well, right? So folks who are using OpenShift and OpenShift virtualization giving us feedback, and by us, I really mean you, Peter, and team, around like what it works best, what makes the most sense for how we interact with and want to interact with the workloads that are running inside of there. So there's big picture UX things that change on a regular basis. And for anybody who's using OpenShift virtualization for the last 5, 6, 7, 8 releases, you've seen a lot of significant changes. But exactly what Ifat was just showing, there's also little features. There's little things that help just make it easier and more intuitive to use beyond the big picture things. And I think it's really cool to see that tail of, oh, we didn't just throw this thing out there and then move on to the next big thing. Rather, it's focusing on all the different aspects.
For sure. And I'll say I can only take a limited amount of credit for any of this. Ifat is certainly the mastermind of all this OpenShift virtualization work, along with our wonderful product management team you referenced running earlier. So thank you to them.
Yeah, I've said before that I think you all are secretly masochists, because it seems like everybody just comes to you to complain about how everything is. So I always like to make a point of pointing out, like, I think all this is amazing. Like, it's really, really awesome work, and it's really exciting.
Yeah.
I'd pass it back to you if you want to keep sharing.
Sure, thank you. Okay. So back to the networking stuff. Our main effort for 421 was to make the networking configuration more user-oriented, starting from the underlay configuration to the creation of VMs networks. This initiative has 2 steps. We start with the physical networks. So we wanted to simplify the underlay network configuration of the nodes, and then move to create VM networks, which enables users to use an OVNK localnet to build VM networks. The full flow enables users to create a new network, configure it on specific nodes, and then make it accessible to VMs. So let's start with the physical networks. We're introducing here a new logical entity called physical networks, and the users can create a single, very simple configuration per host or per multiple hosts from the same type. So they don't need to create any complex or prone to error networks configuration, NNCP, that they used to have before, and were quite hard to configure and understand for many users, as we found out. So if we take a look at this page of the physical network, you can see, maybe it's a bit small, but you can see that we have the network red here. Thank you. And this network red reveals below it the NNCPs. So you can see it has 3 nodes that are configured. One of them is configured on a single node and the other on 2 nodes. This is, I forgot to mention, this is on admins only view, but we're aiming for that. And if you click on a configuration, a side row opens up with 2 tabs. So you can see in the details tab all the details of this configuration. And if you move to the second tab, which is the state enhancement state tab, you can see all the states, the statuses per node. These are the states that we display. And users can also filter by the different states and get a better understanding about the nodes.
So Yifat, I'll interrupt you there for a moment to kind of put all of this in context.
Sure.
So for anybody who's used networking or configured networking with OpenShift before, we focus that networking config around nm state. So nm state is a YAML representation of effectively network manager. So if you've ever looked at network manager, right, nm CLI, any of those things, it's another layer of abstraction for that. And within that, we go in and we define things like, oh, I want to create a new bond. And that bond consists of these 2 network adapters, and it has, it's a mode 4 bond. It has these additional configuration parameters, so on and so forth. And then from there, we take that bond and we create an OVS. And then that OVS uses that bond as an uplink, and we attach from there things like a bridge map. And that bridge map is what we use to then connect all of our virtual machines into their respective networks. So this, historically, that UI was relatively simplistic. It was also form-driven, but it was decoupled or disconnected kind of logically from that whole process. So, and it was difficult to create those objects as an administrator that applied to multiple nodes. Because the expectation is, hey, I've got a cluster that's, 10, 15, 50 nodes, and most of those nodes are probably homogeneous, if I'm talking of a bare metal hypervisor cluster. So wouldn't it be great if I could create, through the UI, one NNCP that is going to apply the configuration across all of the nodes that match this configuration? And then taking that a step further, like, what's the status of applying that configuration to those nodes? Like, show me the details, what's happening behind the scenes, so on and so forth. And so what we've looked at so far is basically exactly that, right? Hey, how do I configure the physical networking on my nodes to be able to be used by something else? And that something else doesn't have to be a virtual machine network. It could be, I configure a physical network on my nodes that I'm going to use for maybe a dedicated IP storage network, right? iSCSI or NFS or something like that, or a dedicated live migration network, or as an interface, a bond interface that I'm going to use to create 2 VLAN interfaces, one for live migration and one for backup traffic or something like that. Right? So trying to simplify that whole process and distill it down into a logical flow that makes sense to as many of us, old school hardware admins and virtualization admins like me, as possible. But also, we can't get around the fact that, well, it's still OpenShift, it's still Kubernetes, it's still nm state. And so we want to make sure that we surface up enough of that to give folks the configurability that we want and that we need. Because we can't assume that everybody's just doing, a basic generic, LACP, configuration in there. We have to do that configurability. And then I think the next step that we're going with, so kind of everything that you've shown so far, Yifat, and correct me if I'm wrong, that's just configuring that, again, that basic or base level networking config stuff. So I think a moment ago I said like, oh, we create an OVS. That wasn't a part of that previous step. I think this is just like configuring bonds, maybe assigning a static IP address if it's going to use a static IP address, like all those other things. It's not till we get the point of creating virtual machine networks that we get to creating an OVS.
Yeah, we'll get that in a second.
Okay.
Thank you for the explanation and clarification. So let's dive into the creation flow. It's a pretty simple wizard. We're removing actually the Linux option and focusing on VMs. So the first step is to define the network identity. We just need to give it this physical network a name. And the second step is to select the nodes, which is actually the nodes configuration, what's used to be the NNCP definition. Users have here 2 buttons to select from, either to apply to all the nodes on the cluster, or apply it just to specific subsets of nodes using the node selector. Then they can give this configuration a name and description optionally. The third step is selecting the uplink connection. And they can select between going with the default option, say single interface, or create a bond. We won't get into all the options here, but it's mainly very easy to go with the default option.
If you jump back to that, sorry to interrupt you. So if you jump back to that, this is one of the first ones where in my view, this is really abstracting a lot of things that are happening underneath the covers. Because in my head, I'm translating this into how we would do it if I was using like straight YAML and NNCP in order to do this, which at the end of the day, that's exactly what's getting created. It's just the system is doing it in its own, in the wizard-driven, GUI-driven way. So like this uplink connection, the default node network means that it's going to utilize the same network connection that is being used by the node IP address, which is where the one that's on the machine network, it's the one that the SDN uses, so on and so forth. So as the administrator previously, I would have to go in and I'd have to do several steps inside of here to basically prepare and configure that link and that OVS to be able to be used like this. Whereas now it's literally just a radio button, right? I select that I want to use this one, and it takes care of everything behind the scenes. And I'll also point out, I'll take a moment to point out, like at the very beginning, it said it was going to create an OVS, an Open vSwitch, which is, it's both an opinionated and not an opinionated implementation here. So having done virtualization with OpenShift Virtualization for a long time, we're really good/bad, depending on your perspective, about not having an opinion, because it's like, oh, Peter, Peter's going to do, OpenShift virtualization, and he says, well, how should I configure my network? And we say, well, how is your network configured? We can make it work like that. And it's like, we can, what type of connectivity do you want for your VMs? And you say, oh, well, I'm familiar with Linux Bridge. That's what I used before. We'll say, well, great, you can use Linux Bridge. And we're very oftentimes reactive to the things that our customers are familiar with and or want to do, and we're not very good at being opinionated of like, oh no, this is the best way to do it, we should be doing it this way unless you have reasons not to. And so like I've started to recognize and see, like the UI, we're starting to do opinionated ways of doing things as through that user experience, user interface. That doesn't mean that me as the administrator, I'm still the authority, right? I can still go in and I can still configure things however I want. It just, I may not be able to use the UI for every step of that. There's different configuration ways of, if you want to use a Linux bridge, and there are valid reasons to do it, I would go in and I would do that a different way, as opposed to this way, which streamlines the whole process and sets you up for what, generally speaking, we think is the way that will work for the vast majority of folks. So you might be thinking, why OVS? Well, OVS is what's required to be used by UDNs, user-defined networks. And the default that we want to encourage folks to use is cluster UDNs for virtual machine networks, because now I can create a cluster UDN with a VLAN tag attached to an OVS that is across all of my different nodes. And I can now provide network access to my VMs as they live migrate around all the nodes in the cluster. I don't have to manage each node individually. I use it by identifying that base configuration. And I'll also point out that was an important thing on, I think it was the previous step, or maybe it's the next step of, like, hey, I create these different uplink configuration or these different physical node configurations, but they don't all have to be the same. My nodes don't have to be homogeneous. Maybe in my 10 node cluster, 5 of them have, one network config, the other 5 have a different network config. And I want to create a single, and I'm going to create an OVS on top of each one of those, but I have a single network mapping for those, which is where all of my VMs get attached. And so even though the physical networking is different, the logical networking used by the VMs is homogenized across there. So again, there's a huge amount of complexity that's abstracted away here. And I love that. I love that we are making it so much easier for folks to take advantage of these things. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, thank you. And actually, speaking of being opinionated, if you do decide to go with the default node network as the first option here, you can actually skip the next step of the settings because the bridge is already configured. So this step is only relevant if you decide to go with option 2 or 3. The last step is to review and create. So you just need to go over what's displayed here and confirm by clicking the create button, which will lead you to the physical networks page where you can see what you've just created. So for the VMs network, which is creating an OVN LocalNet based network for VMs, dedicated for VMs, once the physical network was created, as we just saw, you can start to create the VM networks. This is a simplified way, so it will eliminate the need to create a NAD, but it's important to know that you must have at least one physical network in order to create a VM network. And if you don't have any, you are directed to the physical network page to create one. This is what we have here as an example. So the VMs networks page, which will be nested under the virtualization section, is supposed to allow us to list and define opinionated cluster UDN of LocalNet topology type. We also allow other networks in the project to be seen here under the other VM networks tab right next to the top. These are not VM specific, but we do show them here. So if users click the Create Network blue button at the right top corner of the screen, they will be led into a quick 2 steps wizard to create a VM network. So as I mentioned before, this is optimized for VMs. The first step here is to define the network. So users need to select the physical network they want to use, give it a name and description, optional description, and they can go with the default MTU and move to the next step, which is selecting the projects that this network will be available in. Since it's a cluster-wide network, they can select the projects individually or select specific subsets of nodes from this list, or go with the third option, which is the label to specify specific projects. This is an example for the VM's networks details page, as we have for many other resources. But here we decided to add some additional tabs to make it more usable for users to see. Here they can see the connected projects that are connected to this network. We also have the connected VMs tab, where they can take a look at this from the perspective of the virtual machines themselves. And as I mentioned before, we have the other VM networks type tab at the very top, which will list network definitions that are compatible with VMs. And that's it for networking. This was the first item that we wanted to highlight for 421.
So,
yeah.
And Yufat, if you'll allow me to indulge for a moment, I'm going to steal a share from you, because I'm going to attempt to illustrate kind of a different view of all the things that are happening here to help translate for folks. And I'm going to use the world's worst tool for doing this, and that is Google Slides. So we'll see what happens. But my goal is, like, everything that you showed here with the virtual machine networks are these are effectively a network attachment definition, which is managed by the UDN concept. And those map to the bridge map that's defined on the OVS, and the OVS is assigned to a physical network via an uplink. So the way that I would describe this with words is, if you're familiar with VMware and how VMware, like the look and feel of VMware and their networking, right? In that window, I have a big square that represents a vSwitch. That vSwitch is kind of like a bridge map in OVS terms, and it's kind of not. So because that bridge map becomes the pivot point for where I associate VM networks, which are effectively port groups in VMware technology, and uplinks, which are in OpenShift, which are that OVS with the associated uplinks or physical networks associated with it. And that's how we configure all of those things together. So that's kind of how you would rotate or pivot that to maybe look like something you're familiar with. But we don't have that graphical representation of a quote unquote switch available inside of OpenShift. So I don't know if it's worthwhile for me to try and recreate that using Google Slides again. In my, I don't even have like something I can actually draw with. It's using just boxes. But I don't know if anybody has. I can try and do that ad hoc or on the fly if anybody wants. But if not, I might try and create some slides and then share them out with folks to get some feedback on how we can visualize what that looks like. But I think it's a really important concept to take away, which is like the bridge map, which might not be something everybody's familiar with, becomes that pivot point for associating physical networking and the underlying pieces and virtual networking in the way that we connect VMs to the outside world. It doesn't just have to be VMs, it can be container-based workload too.
Thank you, Sully. Okay, so let's jump into another feature that we delivered in the latest release 4.21, which is we cannot avoid cooperating with AI now these days. So we are integrating Lightspeed, which is the AI for OpenShift, into the UI. So, as you know, OpenShift Lightspeed provides insights into workloads that are running on clusters. It can provide recommendation, help troubleshoot issues, and do many more things. But currently, up until now, users had to install Lightspeed, then open the Lightspeed UI, then load the relevant files, which are YAML files, docs, logs, etc., and then type the question. The new feature shortens this process and keep everything within the related context. So users don't have to switch screens or get lost or whatever. So for example, when a VM runs into an error state, instead of opening Lightspeed, loading the VM YAML, and then ask the questions, users can just simply click the arrow and get all the Lightspeed insights automatically within one click. And one thing that is important to note is that this is enabled only if Lightspeed is installed on the cluster. So how it looks, this is still a mock-up, but we're going to have it implemented really soon. So a short explanation within the popover that we already have, integrated directly and reduce the links and provides most of the required answers right here. If users want to dig into a deeper level of answer, they can click the button here below, which will be either troubleshoot or learn more, because we found out that this is valid for troubleshooting and conceptual or terminology items that they are not familiar with. So if they click this button, they will get a more thorough information, and side row will be opened with all the relevant files, YAML, logs, events, etc. And it will save them from uploading them by themselves and staying in context. So this is something also that will be able in 4.21.
And maybe, if you don't mind, Yifat, I just mentioned OpenShift Lightspeed is something, it's been out there for a couple of releases now of OpenShift. So that's like our AI offering. We're investing more in the virtualization experience and the rest of the OpenShift experience, just because, as we said earlier, there are a lot of new like virtualization oriented admins that might be less familiar with the interactions inside of OpenShift console. So it seems like a perfect opportunity to use AI to help assist those folks, along with anybody else using OpenShift console. So I just wanted to highlight that's one of the reasons we're particularly focused on this interaction at this time.
Yeah, thank you, Peter.
I actually have a cluster with Lightspeed in it if we want to take a look.
Sure.
It doesn't have, I think this one-click thing isn't available yet, but I can show what Lightspeed looks like for folks who might not have seen it before.
Yeah, thank you.
Let's see here. Yeah, so this is actually this is a cluster that's run by our ACM folks. So this one is running, let's see, 4.20.13. And down here in virtualization, so first, for anybody who hasn't seen OpenShift virtualization in a while, there's been some pretty substantial changes in here. So one, this is just my, because I'm just a user inside of this cluster, so I can only see the VMs that are like in my namespaces and stuff like that. However, I'm also an administrator, so I can see some other projects and stuff that's going on inside of here. So what I wanted to look at is, if we look at this Moccasin Galliform VM, you see it's waiting for volume binding. So I don't know what that means. Like, why are you in this status? So I can come here and click on Lightspeed, and I can ask Lightspeed questions about what's going on in my cluster. So I'm going to attach the YAML file, and I'm going to attach the logs. Oh, there's no logs found because the pod hasn't started. Okay, and I can say, why is this VM failing to provision? And let's see what Lightspeed has to say. Right, so due to the following reasons, insufficient storage, it's saying that no nodes are available because they don't have free storage. And then there's a volume binding issue, right? Waiting for volume binding that suggests that the data volume is not yet bound. Okay, snapshot, blah, blah, blah. So why is the volume not binding? So not binding due to insufficient storage resources available. Okay, to address this, you should verify node storage, adjust the storage class, or provision additional storage. So it's kind of giving me this series of steps or series of things that I can try in order to get there, right? So how can I verify the storage capacity? So check persistent volume usage. So it's kind of, again, walking me through this series of things. Let's go to configuration and storage, right? And CentOS Stream 9, here's the data volume. You can see it's pending population. So why is it pending population, right? So let's try from here. So let's attach the YAML file and say, what does pending population mean for the status, and how do I fix it? So the goal here is just, again, to use the system, use the LLM to help me figure out what's going on and why. So here it's saying the PVC is pending. So clone pending indicates blah, blah, blah. So let's see if we can find the PVC for this. So if I go to storage and I go to persistent volume claims, and yeah, so there's no PVC for whatever reason. I suspect, because if we come back up here to the virtual machine, waiting for volume binding typically means that when the PVC or whatever storage class was associated with it, it was created with wait for first consumer before creating the volume. And that doesn't always work with every particular storage provider. So more than likely that's what's happening. But if I query it long enough, we'll get there. I'm going to shortcut this one in the interest of time. But just showing, go ahead.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Yifat, but this would be an example of like where that new interaction would appear, because this is the status of that VM. So now instead of even having to interact with that chat window, there would just be a link there that's like troubleshooting.
Exactly, and you won't need to upload any YAML or logs or events. It will be automatically done, so it will save you extra clicks and be much faster.
Yep. Yeah, and just a few other things if you haven't seen either OpenShift Virtualization or ACM recently. So this cluster is a part of ACM, so I have this fleet virtualization option. So on a single cluster, I have a tree view that shows all of the different namespaces that have virtual machines inside of here. But with ACM and fleet virtualization, now I can see that across all of the clusters that are available. However, it also adheres to RBAC. So inside of this cluster, you see, I can see all of the different virtual machines that are running. But this cluster, I don't have access to. So it doesn't let me see those virtual machines. and it doesn't let me do things with those virtual machines inside of there. Whereas down here, I can. So moving out to that multi-cluster experience, right? Knowing that folks don't have one cluster of virtualization, they have multiple clusters, you know, based on whatever reasons that we have different clusters. Giving that experience both as an administrator, having a central point of management, but more importantly, at least in my opinion, as the VM user. I shouldn't have to care where the admin team or the Virt team puts my VMs. I should be able to go to one place, ACM, and see all of my VMs and all of the things that I care about there, which is really cool in my opinion. And then there's also, and I always forget where it's at. There is a way to access the, is it up here? No, I can never remember where it's at because I go to it so infrequently. But you can access the dashboards, I think is where it's at.
Feel free to let us know, Sully, if you ever encounter things like this. It's exactly the type of feedback we're looking for.
Yeah, well, it's I'm looking for the dashboards for like virtual machine right sizing and all that other stuff. And I go here so infrequently that I just forget where it's at usually.
Perhaps if you go to Fleet Virtualization and then is it the I was thinking there was more left nav items here. Maybe that's why I tripped up myself.
Yeah. This cluster gets abused regularly, so it's entirely possible that something's broken.
Yeah.
So don't read into that too much. As you can tell by the way it's now stalled trying to load things inside of here, because we are constantly giving these, yeah, you see all the things. Yeah, that's probably why there's a, yep.
Yeah,
One of the observability plugins is degraded. Again,
if you're looking to see more metrics and stuff that is related, we are also planning to do major changes in the next release, which will be 4.22. So you would be able to see a mini overview of a cluster, a project, any level that you have in the tree, you will be able to see it on the right pane of your screen. So you'll still be in context and be able to move quickly between the different hierarchies and get the reflection of their metrics on the right side.
Yeah.
So this is also something to expect.
Yeah, so I see the comment here about, you know, uploading a YAML file. They shouldn't include credentials. If credentials are in the VM definition file, then there's probably, it's either a leftover from using Cloud Init and assigning Cloud Init during the VM creation, or hopefully we're doing something wrong there. So the LLM, I wouldn't say that it gave me a non-useful response. It was walking through a step of things or steps of things as we were trying to trace back and find out what the actual issue is. So rather than me going through the next 3 or 4 different steps and spending, you know, 5 or 8 minutes just going through and asking the LLM various questions, I just skipped to the end and pointed out what I suspect is the issue on this one.
Yeah, I started sharing my screen here just because I had this other cluster that was an ACM cluster. So we have this overview page, which I know you thought this is maybe one area that there's going to be more changes coming to as well. But I wasn't sure, Sully, if it was this virtualization dashboard, perhaps, that highlights some of the top consumer namespaces, this type of thing.
Oh yeah, yeah. That's one of the dashboards. Yes. I know I think they're changing or in the process of changing over to using, now I'm going to forget the name of the project, but moving away from Persis, yes, moving away from Grafana.
That's right.
So Zvratko, apologies for butchering usernames. If that has not been opened as a bug, that should definitely be opened as an issue. That is the furthest thing from funny, accidentally losing data as a result of something like that. So I will make sure that somebody is aware of that. If you want to reach out to me directly, Sully, SULLY at redhat.com, we can definitely make sure that that is addressed, because that's not okay. Yeah, Yafet, were you at the end of your slides?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. So that was all the stuff that I had today. So Peter, I didn't know if there's anything else you wanted to share or anything else you wanted to chat about.
I mean, honestly, I think that covered a lot of it. Yeah, I think we were back in November. We joined a live stream where Yifat shared some of that multi-cluster virtualization work. So if you have interest, that was available in mid-November. But otherwise, I think we have plans in coming back maybe the next month or so to talk about some of the security changes we've been making with advanced cluster security. We have designers on our team focused in that area. So I think that might be the next time you see us.
Okay. Yeah, so to our audience, thank you for joining us today. While I'm kind of rambling here to the closeout, if you have any other thoughts, comments, questions, or concerns, please be sure to put those into chat. Or as I said a moment ago, please don't hesitate to reach out to either myself or Jonny, SULLY at redhat.com, or JONNY at redhat.com. So we appreciate you joining today, appreciate chat, comment, questions, etc. Thank you so much for all of that. Next week, I don't remember what is on our topic list, but once Jonny gets back, I will confirm with him and we'll make sure to get the live stream staged and available. There was some sort of issue with the platform this week. I know there was a YouTube outage yesterday, and I don't know if maybe that contributed to it, but it didn't show up. Peter actually pointed it out to me before we were starting the stream. He's like, I don't see it in the list of upcoming streams. So it didn't get added until the last minute for whatever reason today. So apologies for any confusion that was caused by that. Other than that, thank you so much for joining us. I look forward to having Jonny back next week, and hopefully I won't have this obnoxious head cold that is making it hard for me to concentrate and talk for long periods of time. And with that, thank you so much, everybody. Peter, you've had any last words?
Just get better.
Yeah, feel better. Thank you.
I appreciate it, y'all.
Thank you.
All right.
So long.
Have a great rest of your week, and we'll see everybody next Wednesday at 11 a.m. Eastern. Thank you.
Bye-bye.